This week on Stompbox Saturday, I'm going to show you all my brand new praise and worship pedal board. I'm going to show you the guitars, amp, and effects that I use for this setup, and also explain my choices of why I chose the pedals that are currently on it, and ultimately answer the question, why did I go from something with far more options that was a lot bigger to something much more compact with fewer options, and quite frankly, in my personal opinion, sounds a little better. Hey friends, I'm Sean Pierce Johnson and welcome to my YouTube channel. Whether this is your first time here or you are a repeat viewer, I am so glad that you are here. If you haven't done so already, please do click the subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and if you're feeling frosty, click the link below and sign up for my email newsletter. Now, although I've only been playing in the praise and worship context for about 2 years at this point, I do feel like I have a pretty decent grasp on what makes the praise and worship sound. Personally, I notice a lot of other guitar players relying on guitars that either have single coil pickups or humbucking pickups with a little bit lower output and maybe veer towards a jangly kind of sound. And then as far as gain stuff goes, it's usually low to medium gain overdrives stacked into each other. And then of course, there's also the seemingly over-reliance on delays and reverbs to create big ambient washes. I know I'm generalizing all that a little bit, but that's what I hear when I listen to recordings of popular worship artists. Having all of this in mind regarding the genre, I was endeavoring when I got started to maybe use a bit more equipment that I would use on a regular basis. After all, one of the things that I felt was really important when starting to play in this context was an authenticity of myself, because I felt as a believer that's what God would want me to do. And so my first worship pedal board looked like this. Looking at this first pedal board, nothing about it is outside the realm of what I would use on a normal basis. You see, my Jennings Navigator is the guitar that I'm using, which is a guitar that I absolutely love, and just so happens to work really well in the praise and worship context. But you also see my Keeley Fuzzbender, which I've never really heard many worship guitar players use fuzz, but I was trying to incorporate that thing into as many situations as I possibly could. In addition, another odd man out on this board is the Rev G4. Usually the highest gain thing I see on a worship pedal board is a Proco Rat or some derivative of it. And the Rev G4 is most certainly a bit more than a Rat. And even with those two being the whole obvious "that doesn't go there" additions to the pedal board, everything else is stuff that I had loved for years, loved previously outside of playing in the worship context. Now, like every guitar player, over time and with a certain level of new experience, things change. Pedals got swapped out, things got put back in, taken off, and there were even some experimentations. At one point, I had everything on my Warwick rock board, which is just one big like pedal train style board on one level. That thing was absolutely massive, backbreaking, and a little too much. Eventually, I worked myself back to the twin tier board that I had started out with, and the last iteration of that board looked like this. You can see there's plenty of usual suspects here, but of course a few different experiments, trying some things out, and I was really happy with this setup for a very long time. Nothing about it was really all that difficult to operate, and I certainly got plenty of experimentation out of it and was able to do, well, pretty much all the big things that I was doing at church with this board. But then on a particular Sunday, or maybe it was several Sundays, I can't remember honestly, I started feeling like I was fighting that pedal board more than I was actually playing that pedal board. I started noticing little things about it that were starting to really get on my nerves, and it really hindered my ability to not only enjoy the experience of playing worship, but also the preparation that I would put into for any Sunday that I was on stage. And so around that time, and with a few other things going on in life, I decided to take a little bit of an extended absence from playing at church and tried to figure things out. I just decided it was time to simplify. Guitar, pedals, amplifier. Go back to the basics and not worry too much about the mucky muck and the fancy gadgets. And so, with that in mind, this is what I created. Repeat viewers of the channel are immediately going to notice that this pedal board is a mixture of old reliables and new favorites. Everything that you see on this board is stuff that I've made a video of within the last 3 or 4 years. Before we get into hearing the pedal board, let's first talk about the signal flow, which of course starts with the guitar. Now I tend to use a rotation of 3 or 4 different guitars when I play in the worship context, of which the Fender American Pro 2 Strat is one of them. But I also use the following. My custom Jennings Navigator. This was the guitar I used on my very first Sunday playing at church, and I actually used it at my most recent Sunday playing at church. Tellies really work for the praise and worship genre because of that twang and jangle that really seems to help a lot of the guitar parts stick out in a very dense mix. I also use something a little bit atypical of praise and worship guitar players. My Bigsby vibrato equipped Gibson Les Paul Studio. Now the Bigsby part of it is pretty ubiquitous. I see tons of worship guitar players with guitars that are Bigsby equipped, but I don't see many of them playing Les Pauls. And I really started using this when there were multiple electric guitars in the band on a few different special events. I wanted to be able to have a more distinctive sound from my co-guitarist and be able to more broadly represent the frequency spectrum, so to speak. And finally, my most recent addition to the rotation is the Moore GTR S, which I really didn't anticipate would perform quite as admirably as it did. But on one particular Sunday, this ended up being the guitar for the entire set. Didn't change guitars at all. Now let's work our way from the guitar down to the pedal board itself. The pedal board is an Excel Audio XTA21 with the Effects 8 command center. If you want to see a video just on this board and switcher, there is a link in the card at the top right corner of your screen. First thing the guitar sees is the TC Polytune Tune Noir, which of course is a tuner. I've elected to use that as my input as opposed to having it on the Effects 8's tuner mute jack so that I can easily have something on the side of the pedal board to plug into. Then after that, it goes into the Effects Command Center 8, and then almost every pedal on the board is in a loop of the Effects 8. First pedal, Keeley Compressor Plus. Classic, does the thing. It's one of my favorite compressor pedals of all time and should be yours too. Then a chorus pedal. Now I've experimented with a bunch of them and I decided to use the Chase Bliss Warp Vinyl Hi-Fi for my purposes here. I did it because I found a good setting on one of my previous pedal boards that was able to, just by using the tap tempo function, go from a nice CE2-ish kind of chorus to a faux Leslie sound, which I don't always need, but is certainly a welcome thing to have. Now we get to the fun section of the pedal board, or at least the section I find the most fun, the distortion section, which starts with the Rev Tilt Overdrive. My absolute current favorite 2-in-1 overdrive and boost. This thing performs like a champ every time it is called upon. I've even had Sundays where I leave it on all the time, and just by manipulating the volume control, I can get really beautiful clean tones as well as super saturated leads. The boost also comes in very handy for helping shape some guitar sounds. It also does great for swells, just adding a little bit of extra level going into those time-based effects. Nice little tool. Then another old favorite, the Ibanez Session Man, which is essentially nothing more than a Rat-style distortion. The distortion in the Session Man is based on the Ibanez Fat Cat, which in and of itself is based on the Rat. And now the hallmark section of a praise and worship pedal board, the time-based stuff, delays, reverbs, and the like. I use the Keeley Echoes, the Walrus Audio Slow, and the Keeley Hydra Reverb and Tremolo. Now, the Echoes and the Slow are in loops of the Effects 8, so I can kind of put those on a preset if I want. The Echoes is almost always on. But the Hydra is outside the loop for a couple reasons. One, I want to be able to have a standard, I hate to use that word because it's just so standard, but I use it as an always on reverb. So it doesn't matter if it's in a loop and I need to program that on. But the real reason for it being outside the Effects 8 is a practical reason. You can see on the far left side of the pedal board that I have my instrument cable coming out of the Hydra so that it then goes to the amp, which is my Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit 200 set on a clean tone only. And then from the Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit 200, we go out DI from the red box DI on the back. I don't use any speaker cabs. Everything that we do on stage is a silent stage and goes direct to front of house. But ultimately, it follows that old school flow of guitar, effects, amp, and that's what you do. Oh, and I completely forgot to mention my volume pedal, the Sonicake Vol-Wah. And yes, it is a 2-in-1 volume and wah pedal. The wah sounds very nice, but I hardly ever use it in this context. And now I'm curious what some of you out there think of my choices for playing in a praise and worship context. I'm sure other worship guitar players are going to have their own opinions. So let me know in the comments section below. But let's actually stop talking and, well, we're going to talk a little bit more, but let's actually hear this thing. So to get us started, I'm just going to go ahead and use the American Pro 2, and I'll do that for a very specific reason, which I'll mention in just a little bit. So let's kick off the tuner and hear some sounds. But first, let's hear that clean amplifier so you can hear exactly what I start out with. You can hear I don't set it to be on the edge of breakup. I'm not really trying to emphasize one frequency range over the other. It's just supposed to be a nice middle-of-the-road clean tone, which then immediately gets the Hydra's plate reverb attached to it. You can hear that it's a pretty long decay reverb, but I turn the color control all the way down to make it a fairly dark thing. And I do that because I really want to try to create this dark wash almost underneath that I can get away with putting a lot more into the guitar sound. Now we can go on to presets on the Effects 8, starting with preset A, naturally. Excuse the scratchy volume pot, I need to clean this one out. And if I want to add the chorus on there, I just go ahead and click loop 3. And it sounds like this. But maybe I don't want it on, so I'll take it off. It's no big deal. Now we work our way to preset B. This is a sound that surprisingly has become my go-to sound, and it incorporates the tilt, the echoes, the slow, and the Hydra all together. Basically, the entire bottom half of the pedal board is engaged at this point. really like about this sound so much is that depending on the guitar, usually something with single coils, I can get a lot of mileage out of it. Let me go ahead and show you exactly how much I'm able to get out of it, starting with the guitar's volume full up. Now you notice that the tilt doesn't have its boost engaged, so that's something that I'll just bring into taste. Say I want to keep that sound, but I want just a little bit of bump in saturation. I can just reach down and adjust the tilt EQ or the boost and get exactly whatever extra volume and saturation boost I want to out of it. The next sound is where things get really saturated, and something that I often find some of my bandmates don't want me to use as often, but I just can't help it. It's the Session Man, the Echoes, and the Slow all together with the Hydra. I could easily say that the Session Man is in my top 5 distortion pedals of all time. So yeah, I always have a lot of fun when this thing is kicked on. I also find that it actually does respond pretty well to some volume knob workage. You also have to watch your picking dynamic to make it a little bit cleaner, but I'm always really surprised too that I can get away with the tone knob being turned all the way down on humbuckers and with single coils and still get a good amount of clarity to it. The last preset that I made is something that is kind of all-encompassing for crazy things. Depending on what the set calls for, I can basically use anything I want and make whatever the preset is that I need, and also have the volume pedal engaged. but this is the one that I reserve for things that really need those swelled parts to come out. And usually I'm also pairing that up with either an E-bow or a slide. I'll go ahead and use the E-bow for this right now and show you exactly what I like to use this for. Again, forgive the scratchy volume pots. Some of these guitars have been used quite a lot recently and haven't gotten the TLC they need. But yeah, that's kind of my swell patch. That's the thing where if there's some E-bow part, if there's a slide part, if there's something that I really just need big washy pads, it's stacking everything on top of itself in order to create some sort of amazingly ambient, emotive sound. Another genre that I see a lot of praise and worship guitar players implement into their style is Americana, which in and of itself has roots in country and blues. So with that in mind, I do often hear a lot of medium gain stuff with a decent amount of a traditional kind of reverb, but also has that pulsing of tremolo that just sounds really lovely. Now, I hope you've enjoyed some of the sounds that you've heard in the video today, but you are probably wondering why these pedals? Why would I choose these? And why would I choose to condense as much as I have? And ultimately, it all comes down to two things: performance and getting more out of less. When it comes to the Keeley compressor, the Warp Vinyl Hi-Fi, and the Session Man, I've used those three pedals in so many different contexts and a lot in praise and worship that they just always perform exactly like I want them to. And the bottom row pretty much speaks for itself, being the getting more out of less. Everything, except for the slow, on the bottom row of the pedal board is a 2-in-1 pedal. And like I said earlier, if there's ever a change I want to make, I can easily just reach down, grab a knob, and make a change however I see fit. I do consider myself a bit of a MIDI idiot, so that's also one reason for having so much with so little. But eventually I'll learn MIDI, and maybe I'll put together a board with all the fancy stuff. But for right now, everything on this does exactly what I need it to do. And in the last few Sundays that I've used this board, I've been really happy with my sound. It's consistent, it's never susceptible to faulty electrical. Everything just sounds like it should, and I'm able to just play, and I'm able to create, I'm able to enjoy myself. And that's really what we should be doing when it comes to authentic worship, playing, and music. There should be an authenticity. We shouldn't be trying to be something that we're not. And there you have it, my friends. That is my downsized praise and worship pedal board. Definitely atypical of what I see a lot of other worship guitarists doing for their downsized boards, but one that I think works really well for me. Everything on here is something that I'm familiar with and know it's going to perform well night after night, and I don't have to wrap my head around a bunch of instruction manuals and menus in order to get sounds that I really enjoy. Now, this video is not to say that I don't anticipate seeing some changes on this pedal board. I'm almost assuredly going to swap something out in the coming weeks, but everything on here is exactly what I need for this context. I might just add a different chorus as opposed to the warped vinyl, or maybe even try a different medium gain overdrive or distortion just to see if there's something better or more suited for that particular week's set in my collection. But I would love to know what you all thought of this pedal board. I really enjoy doing pedal board rundowns like this because I spend so much time just telling you what I think about these pedals that I don't often get a whole lot of opportunities to show you how I actually use these things in the context of a rig or a band. So if you did enjoy it, please let me know by telling me in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, I would love it if you joined my little pedal head community by clicking the subscribe button and ringing in the notification bell. But the best thing that you can do is to sign up for my email newsletter by clicking the link in the description box below, the card in the top right-hand corner of your screen, or going to seanpiercejohnson.com/email-list and joining today. Every single video that I make is delivered direct to your email inbox without the algorithm messing things up. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with me. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend, and until we see each other next, my friends, I'm Sean Pierce Johnson, wishing you watching great tone, good health, and of course, happy stomping. Cheers, friends. I'll see you in the future. God bless.